The arena was vibrating with that specific kind of electric noise you only hear at a wrestling event. It's a mixture of anticipation, popcorn, and thousands of distinct conversations merging into a single dull roar. But then, the lights didn't just dim, they died. It wasn't a technical glitch, it was a void. For 10 seconds, 20,000 people sat in absolute, suffocating darkness. Usually, this is when the cheers start, when the adrenaline spikes, because the audience knows a surprise is coming. But this time, the darkness felt heavy, felt physical. When the single spotlight finally snapped on, it didn't hit the center of the ring. It hit the top of the ramp, cutting through a thick, unnatural fog that clung low to the ground. There was no music, no pyrotechnic explosion to tell you how to feel, just the sound of heavy boots hitting the steel grating. Clack, clack, clack. Out of the mist, she emerged. But this wasn't the sequined, smiling champion the world remembered from 3 years ago. There were no bright colors, no fan interaction. She was clad in full tactical gear matte black, utilitarian, armor-plated. A vest tight against her chest, combat boots laced high, and dark paint smeared across her eyes like a mask of war. The silence in the arena was deafening. It wasn't the silence of boredom, it was the silence of confusion shifting rapidly into unease. They were waiting for a signal to cheer, a smile, a wave. They got nothing. She stopped at the edge of the ramp, scanning the crowd, not like fans, but like targets. The atmosphere curdled. The air grew cold. In that singular moment, the show stopped being entertainment and started feeling dangerously real. As she began her descent down the ramp, the cameras zoomed in, catching the details that the naked eye might have missed. In stickman terms, imagine the posture change. She didn't walk with the swagger of a superstar. She moved with the predatory efficiency of a soldier entering a hostile zone. The camera caught her eyes cold, detached, void of any human warmth. This was the moment the fear set in. You could see it on the faces in the front row. The kids who usually reach out for a high five pulled their hands back. The men holding signs slowly lowered them, unsure if they were witnessing a storyline or a mental break. The commentary team, usually so quick with their rehearsed lines and hyperbole, fell into a genuine stutter. They didn't know what to call this. Was she a villain? A hero? A mercenary? The script had been thrown out the window. As she approached the ring, the only sound was the hum of the arena's ventilation. System and the collective heartbeat of 20,000 confused souls. She didn't slide into the ring. She walked up the steel steps with a slow, deliberate rhythm. She climbed through the ropes, ignoring the terrified referee who instinctively backed into the corner. She stood in the center of the canvas, surrounded by bright lights, yet she seemed to absorb them rather than reflect them. She looked at the hard camera lens that broadcasts to millions around the world, and tilted her head slightly. It was a look of pure judgment. She wasn't there to wrestle. She was there to dismantle. The fear wasn't about what she would do. It was about the fact that for the first time in years, no one knew what she was capable of. While the audience was paralyzed in the arena, the reaction backstage was a different kind of chaos. Imagine the locker room area, usually a hive of activity with wrestlers taping up wrists, producers shouting time cues, and monitors blaring. But as her boots hit the canvas on the screen, the locker room went still. The current champions, the women who had been carrying the division in her absence, gathered around the small monitor. Their body language shifted from casual confidence to defensive posture. This wasn't just a returning veteran. This was an extinction-level event for their careers. You could see the insecurity ripple through the room. The young upstart who held the title clutched her belt a little tighter, her knuckles turning white. They saw the tactical gear, the lack of showmanship, and they understood the message immediately. The carnival was over. This wasn't about glitz or glamour anymore. The wolf had returned to the sheep pen. There is a specific kind of professional jealousy in wrestling that bleeds into fear. They knew that the oxygen in the room was now hers. Every storyline they had worked on for months, every rivalry they had built, was suddenly rendered irrelevant by a single stare. They weren't just watching a coworker return. They were watching their own relevance fade in real time. The silence in the locker room mirrored the silence in the arena, but it was heavier with dread. They knew that tomorrow the hierarchy would be rewritten, and many of them wouldn't survive the edit. It was a cold realization that in this business, your spot is never owned. It's only rented, and the landlord had just come back to collect. In the production truck, the nerve center of the broadcast, the mood was frantic. The director was shouting for camera angles, but the producers were frozen. This segment was supposed to be a standard return promo. Wave to the crowd, say I'm back, play the music. But she wasn't speaking. She was just standing there, letting the uncomfortable silence stretch until it became agonizing. The producers were screaming into the referee's earpiece, "Tell her to talk, tell her to cut the promo." But the referee, standing feet away from her, was too intimidated to move. This is the side of the drama the cameras don't show. The panic of control slipping away. The executives in their suits, watching from the gorilla position just behind the curtain, were exchanging nervous glances. Was this going too far? Was she going off script? The line between reality and fiction is always blurry in wrestling, but she was erasing it completely. They had wanted an edgy return, they had wanted buzz. But they hadn't bargained for genuine menace. They saw the social media metrics spiking not with joy, but with questions. Is she okay? Is this real? I'm actually scared. This was the paradox of the business. They had created a monster to sell tickets, but now they feared the monster wouldn't obey their commands. The producer's hand hovered over the button to cut to commercial, but he couldn't press it. The tension was too magnetic. They were held hostage by their own creation. It was a masterclass in psychological dominance, proving that you don't need a microphone to control a billion-dollar company. You just need to make them afraid to look away. By the time the show went off the air, the internet wasn't just talking, it was screaming. The image of her in the tactical vest, eyes blackened, standing amidst the fog, had been shared millions of times within the hour. But the captions weren't welcome back. They were "what was that?" and chilling. The wrestling community, usually divided by tribal arguments and conflicting opinions, was united in a singular state of shock. The hashtag she has returned was trending #1 globally, but the sentiment analysis was dark. It was a digital wildfire fueled by uncertainty. People weren't buying tickets to cheer for her. They were buying tickets to see what she would destroy. The fear she projected in the arena had successfully digitized itself, traveling through screens and infecting the timeline. It was a marketing dream, but a PR nightmare. The company couldn't control the narrative anymore, because the narrative was purely emotional. It was raw fear, and fear spreads faster than any carefully crafted press release ever could. Usually, the morning after a big return, the wrestlers on morning talk shows, smiling, holding the belt, explaining how happy they are to be home. It's not her. The requests came in from major networks, magazines, and podcasts. All were denied. Camp released a single statement, no comment. This refusal to engage with the media only threw gasoline on the fire. In an era where every superstar is overexposed on Instagram and TikTok, her digital silence was deafening. She didn't post a thank you fans tweet. She didn't upload a workout selfie. Her social media accounts were scrubbed clean. Black profile pictures. No bio, just a void. This absence created a vacuum that the media filled with even more speculation. Journalists began digging into her time away, looking for reasons for this drastic character shift. Was it real trauma? Was it method acting taken too far? The mystery deepened the emotional investment of the audience. We are so used to knowing everything about our celebrities, what they eat, who they date, where they vacation. By denying us that access, she became a myth. The fear transformed into awe. She was reclaiming the mystique that wrestling had lost 20 years ago. The media chaos wasn't about what she said. It was about the power of withholding. In a noisy world, she proved that the person who stays silent holds the loudest megaphone. The industry was scrambling to understand a game she had already won. She wasn't returning to play a game. She was returning to settle a score with the concept of fame itself. The fear the fans felt was actually her own pain reflected back at them. She had left as a people-pleaser, a smiling doll who did whatever the office asked. She returned as a survivor who realized that in this business, kindness is a weakness. Every wrestler fights two opponents, the person in the ring and the shadow of their own legacy. She had been a champion before. She was beloved, but being beloved is a heavy burden. It means you can never disappoint. It means you have to smile when you're hurt. By returning as this figure of fear, She was effectively burning her own legacy to the ground. She was telling the world, the hero you loved is dead. I killed her. This is a dangerous narrative gamble. If it fails, you ruin your past. If it succeeds, you change your future. The pressure to deliver on that silent promise was crushing. She was compared to legends who had made similar dark turns, but the comparisons felt hollow. This felt more personal. The emotional aftermath for her was the realization that she could never go back. Once you introduce this level of reality and fear into a performance, you can't go back to high-fiving kids in the front row. She had crossed a Rubicon. The legacy she was building now was one of intimidation. It was a lonely path. The locker room feared her, the management couldn't control her, and the fans didn't know whether to cheer or run. She stood alone on an island of her own making, the queen of a kingdom built on anxiety. The weight of expectations was no longer about having good matches. It was about maintaining the aura of a living nightmare. 3 weeks after the return, Champion stood in the ring, trying to cut a promo, trying to look brave. But her voice shook. Then the lights cut. The fog rolled in. The tactical boots hit the ramp. This time, she didn't stop at the ramp. She slid into the ring. The champion raised her fists, ready to fight. But the returning enigma didn't raise hers. She didn't strike. She simply walked up to the champion, invading her personal space, violating the unwritten rules of distance. She leaned in close. The microphones didn't pick it up, but the cameras caught the whisper. She wasn't looking at the championship belt. She was looking into the champion's eyes. It was a violation of the spirit, not the body. She slowly reached out and touched the gold belt on the champion's shoulder knot, with longing but with pity. The crowd was screaming for a fight, for a punch, for a finisher, but she denied them that release. She simply smirked a tiny, imperceptible crack in the mask and turned her back. She walked away, leaving the champion physically unharmed, but mentally shattered. The champion collapsed to her knees, sobbing in confusion and relief. It was more powerful than any powerbomb. It showed that she didn't need to physically hurt you to break you. She could dismantle your confidence with a look. The fear was absolute because it was psychological. And here lies the twist, the reflection that gives this story its depth. The world thought her return was about fear. They thought she was the villain. But as the months went on, the truth unspooled. The tactical gear, the silence, the intimidation, it wasn't an attack on the roster. It was a mirror held up to the audience. She was showing us what we had become. We, the fans, who demand blood, who demand drama, who treat humans like action figures. She gave us exactly what we asked for, a cold, unfeeling machine of war, and it terrified us. Return wasn't about winning a title. It was about exposing the toxicity of the spectacle.